What's going on, football fans? It's your boy Gsluke here with our DFS and prop preview for Thursday Night Football between the Eagles and the Giants. We've got a divisional matchup, two heated rivals going head-to-head, and here in this video, going to make sure you're ready for all of your exposure. With first off, a full breakdown of the DFS slate and what I'm doing for my Draftkings lineups. That'll include some game scripting, ownership in the large field GPPs, how to get different if you want to play in some of the large field contests, as well as a full breakdown of the underdog and the prize pick side with a few props that I've already mixed in for Thursday, some strategy involved with trying to find some value on that side, and a few pieces of exposure detail as well. So by the end, you'll have a game plan of exactly what to do for Thursday. You got a lot to go through. It's not waste any time at all. It started off with, first off, look at the Draftkings DFS side. Unlike some of the recent slates where we've had relatively close spreads, we've got over a touchdown spread here on Thursday, and the Eagles are going to be the big favorites. Also, by far the chalkier side in your DFS lineups. So before you build, whether you're in your single entry, cash lineups, or in the large field GPPs, just know where the rest of the field is going to be going. And that's going to be a whole lot of 4-2 Eagles lineups, 4 players on the Eagles, probably a captain from that side as well. And then a dart, maybe one wide receiver from the Eagles as a buyback, or a running back wide receiver combo. It's going to be a lot of those sort of lineups that you're competing against. So if you're in the large field GPPs, you can leverage yourself off of that, maybe go to a 3-3, or God forbid anything Giants heavy like a 4-2, and you would have all the leverage that you could be hoping for those kind of contests. But if you're in single entry, some of your cash contests, it's important to know that as well. So we're just going to set the table there. Eagles going to be by far the more popular side, and if you agree with that spread like I do, I think the Eagles are deserving favorites here. Then you're going to have to get real creative within those kind of Eagles builds, and that's really what we're going to focus on here during this video. These projections that you're seeing are from a Patreon page, so just a little bit of a PSA there. If you want to download these, go follow along with it, see my entire player pool and everything to the right. You guys can find those on my Patreon. Link in the description to join. NFL DFS tier is how you get access to these, but we're going to use them as a guidebook for our slate here in the video. So let's go through Saquon Barkley first at $11,600. He's expensive, and that's keeping the ownership a little bit lower than it otherwise would be. If he was closer to $10,000, maybe $10,500, he would be 75, maybe even 80% owned. Now some of that ownership is going to a Jalen Hurts, who is also expensive at $11,000, but because his raw projection is over 20 points, he's the one that's getting closer to 80%. So the quote-unquote chalky captains are going to be Barkley and a Hurts, but at the flex position in particular, Jalen Hurts is going to be extremely popular. So I would say that my favorite captain for the Eagles is Saquon Barkley, especially because he's the one that correlates directly with them playing from ahead. The quarterbacks will get some extra rushing usage, especially Jalen Hurts, if they're playing in that positive game script, but the running backs for Philly, whether it's a Barkley, an AJ Dillon, even a Will Shipley who'll mix in at that position from time to time, will get an extra 5 to 8 touches in that kind of a game script. So that's why he's my preferred captain. Also slightly lower ownership at that position as well. But between these two players, that is 50% ownership at captain, just between Barkley and Hurts, is not something that we see quite often. So though I think that both of them are by far the best captains that we have on the slate, in the large field GPPs, it is extremely difficult to get leverage on one of these two players unless you're using one or two of them in every single lineup at captain, right? You have to go pretty much 50% either player to get the kind of leverage that you're hoping for, which is unrealistic if you're a 150 max player. So I would say in the GPPs is where you want to get a little bit more creative about it. When I said that you could play a 4-2 Eagles lineup and try and get some differentiation by being more creative, what I mean is by not playing these players at captain, right? By going to an AJ Brown and hoping that he has a big game, a Devontae Smith, maybe even a Dallas Goedert at the tight end position and hope that he scores once or twice and gets to the optimal lineup that way. If you do that, you might be able to get away with playing that 4-2 lineup towards the Eagles side and not duplicate yourself 100 to maybe 500 plus times. Next up, we got a Jackson Dart at $10,200. That is an extremely expensive price tag, especially for a rookie quarterback making, second, third appearance in the NFL. But he has rushing upside, so that does raise his floor ever so slightly. But at a 15 raw point projection, there's a lot of opportunity cost on dropping from somebody like a Barkley or a Hurts down to a Jackson Dart. And if you're using one of these top two players at the captain position, which is what I'll be doing in a lot of my single entries or cash, then I'm not going to have the salary to pay for Jackson Dart very often. So I would say that he's usable, but really more so in those Giants-led scripts, which means that I'm going to be using a lot of my Jackson Dart exposure in the large field GPPs when I'm actively trying to get different towards the rest of the field. And if the ownership's lower, he's only 43, almost 44% combined ownership between the flex and the captain spot, which could actually lower as the week goes on. The more love that these top two get, get, the less love to go around for guys like a Dart. And Cam Scatterboo, he's somebody that I have projecting decently right now. Not great, though, at 1.3x points per dollar projection. But if Tyrone Tracy Jr. does end up getting rolled out, that would boost his projection and probably put him closer to 1.6 to 1.7x, making him one of the better plays that we have in the spend up tier. He is $10,000, though, way more expensive than he has been for the last couple weeks. So unless Tyrone Tracy Jr. is out, he's going to be a mediocre play at the very best. But if you are going with the Giants led script, even if Tracy is playing, he's going to be a low-owned captain option that you could use. And, if you have the stones to assume that the Giants could potentially win this game, then Cam Scatterboo would be a no-brainer player to use at that captain position. You've got A.J. Brown next, Devontae Smith at $9,600 and $9,800 respectively. Worth noting that they're also really expensive. And, the first couple of weeks of the season, we had extremely soft pricing. Like guys like A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith were like $7,500 to $8,500. Now they're both nearly $10,000. They're conceivably like second, third man into lineups when you have this kind of a salary structure, but you're not going to be able to afford that kind of lineup construction. So I like that they're tightening it up a bit. They're making you take more stands towards the middle, toward the bottom end of the board. And because it's only a 1.4x or a 1.2x points per dollar projection on both of these players, they're tough to want to use in some of your single entries in cash, which is why I think players like a Hurts and a Barkley could be 95 to 99% owned in cash contests for Thursday and borderline locks in that sort of a format, because this sort of a raw point floor, first off, their floor for Barkley and a Hurts is like 14, 15 points. That's the projection for some of these players just below them. I mean, you would be absolutely silly not to take some of those super spend up options and use them in that kind of a format and to go to some of these more volatile formats instead. But the place to use a Brown or a Smith would be in the large shell GPPs. Their ownership's a lot lower than it typically is. And AJ Brown, for example, is only 37% between the flex and the captain spot. And Devontae Smith is only 28% between both positions as well. So if you're going to use them in 40, 50% of your lineups, which is really not even that much on a showdown slate like this, that you get close, maybe even to that 2x leverage mark that a lot of people are looking for, which is valuable on a top tier option. Like an AJ Brown's an elite tier wide receiver. Nobody's going to question that. Alpha Dog would be on pretty much every single roster in the NFL. And Devontae Smith is one of the best wide receiver twos that we have in the NFL. I know they haven't had the hottest start to 2025, but people would kill for these sort of players in any other team. So don't be surprised if one or both of them even has a chance to go off. And what we haven't seen this year has been the Jalen Hurts passing game, where he's gone for like 250 to 300 plus yards, thrown for 2 to 3 touchdowns. It's going to happen at some point. He's too talented of a quarterback not to have that kind of game. And more importantly, he has too talented of wide receivers for that not to happen at some point. So I won't be sleeping on these two, but at least for me, it's almost GPP exclusive. And in particular, if I'm using them at the captain position. Next up, we got a Wan'Dale Robinson at $7,200, a drastic drop off at the price tag, which is not something that we typically see, going from $9,600 the whole way down to $7,200. If Darius Slayton's rolled out like expected, that's also going to boost up his projection, but put him at probably a 1.6 to 1.8x points per dollar projection, which is by far the best of this middle tier range. So a Wan'Dale, who's a PPR threat, short wide receiver, runs a lot of the shorter routes for that team. He's going to get spam targets as he's seen for pretty much all of 2025. The issue is the upside. He's not somebody that scores many touchdowns, that gives you that big play threat very often. He's done it at times. That's always the or he could factor that we get with these players on the showdown format, but somebody that I'd more so be using at flex. So we'll have to see on the Darius Slayton news again. Trends, or I guess current rumors around the team are that he's not expected to play, but we'll have to wait for confirmation on that. And a Tyrone Tracy Jr., at least if you're asking me, I'm not expecting him to suit it up for Thursday. He's missed the last few contests with a lingering injury, and the fact that it's on a short week against a real tough defense like the Eagles, with Cam Scatterboo looking as solid as he has in that kind of an absence, I don't see the worry or the reasoning for going out there and rushing a Tracy back. So another player that we're going to be keeping an eye on from the injury perspective, I'm kind of hoping he's out. And I mean, I hope he's healthy, right? That's, the human element aside. I obviously hope that he's okay, but the selfish fantasy player inside of me kind of wants him to sit on Thursday, because that would make Cam Scatterboo just such a better play, because he's $10,000. It's a little bit too expensive to use him if he's in a timeshare with Tracy at that running back position. But if you're removing all of that usage for Tracy, distributing it over a Scatterboo, a Singletary towards the bottom end of the board, it makes Singletary a decent value play on that Giants side of things, but it makes Scatterboo a usable spend up option as well. I've got a Dallas Goedert next. next at $6,400. He's somebody that is, at least to me, the safest value play that we have at the middle of the board here, and potentially even usable at the captain position. He's extremely low owned there, only 4.4%. And because of how steep the pricing is, and I'm not always a proponent of these middle to even cheap tier captains, there's really only certain slates where it makes sense. This could be one of them if it's a higher scoring game than what they're calling for. The over-under is only 40.5 points, so they don't think there's going to be a whole lot of scoring here. So this is a low percentage outcome. But if it were to be a shootout between these two teams, Giants have been in a couple shootouts this year. Eagles too. They've had a couple close shootouts already through the first couple weeks. If it happens again, and you've got all these expensive skill position players on the slate, you might have to have a cheap captain to fit in 3 or 4 of those players up top. But if that's not the case, it's going to be extremely, extremely rare for Dallas Goedert to be the optimal captain, because he's going to have to score 2 touchdowns, maybe get a raw 20 to 25 point projection to get to that sort of a lineup. But let's say he only scores like 18 points, which would still be a healthy amount, 18 to 20 points, but it's all those spend up options that are going off and that you have to fit into the lineup as well. Then that's the scenario where he could be the player that you have to have there. So I think that there's, at least in GPPs, a scenario where you could be using Dallas Goedert captain lineups, but at flex is going to be probably my highest exposed play in this range. You got a Theo Johnson next. He had a really big week last week, so I think a lot of people are going to be reacting to that, looking at the box score, looking at multiple touchdown game, and jamming him into their lineups. But compared to a Dallas Goedert, I've got him as the inferior play compared to the more established veteran, and the ownership's starting to get pretty close between the two. So if Goddard's only going to be like 8% higher owned and he's got like clearly better projection, then I'm going to be using him as my leverage play, and then, you know, mixing in a little bit of Theo Johnson, because you can't ignore him in a 150 max set of exposure. Even if I'm going to go under the field, maybe it'd be like 15 to 20% that I'm using at most, but not the kind of leverage that I'm looking to get on a Goedert. An Eagles defense is a good way to try and get some differentiation within some of the chalkier game scripts that you might be playing. If you think the Eagles are going to win, but you're trying to differentiate yourself in the big 50 to 100K entry contest, then you could use a Barkley captain, maybe an Eagles defense alongside with it. That's not enough though. You're still going to have to add some differentiation on top of that. Maybe it's a Jahan Dotson. Maybe it's one of the super low owned wide receivers for the Giants that could see some extra usage if Slane is rolled out. All of those are the kind of ways that you could differentiate yourself, but Eagles defense could be one of the ways to do so, and there's some clear correlation with Saquon Barkley as well. You got both kickers here, and the kicker for the Giants, I don't believe has been established quite yet. It's been this Jude guy for the last couple weeks, but I believe a Graham Gano is eligible to be activated off of IR, but we'll have to see whether they end up doing that. If not, it's going to be this McAdamy. Butchered that last name. I didn't want to try it, but we did so anyways. But both of these kickers, and especially Jake Elliott, are going to be on my radar for Thursday. Elliott's got the better projection, 1.7x points per dollar. He's only $400 more expensive than Jude is, and he's on the favorites, on the team with the much higher implied team total. So Jake Elliott for me is the one that I'll be well over the field on, but I'll be mixing in a little bit of the Giants kicker as well. You got these two backup running backs for the Eagles next. You've got a Shipley and an AJ Dillon. Heading into the year, everyone thought that Will Shipley was going to be the backup and was going to be getting a lot of touches for the Eagles, and that has not necessarily been the case. It's been AJ Dillon who's been shouldering a lot of that load. So if I was going to choose between these two, I would want AJ Dillon if the Eagles are playing from ahead, but I would want Will Shipley if they're playing from behind. Reasoning for that is Dillon's more of that bruising back that can help you run out the clock, whereas Shipley's more of a receiving back, more of a shifty guy out of the backfield that would be utilized if they're playing from behind. So if they're, pass blocking, if they need somebody to get some yardage out of the backfield, he's probably the one that would play a little bit more. So slightly script dependent with those backups for Philly. You've also got the Giants defense here. If you have the stones to go out there and stack that side of things, they would be a clear correlation option with either Scadaboo or Tracy at that running back position. You got a Jahan Dotson, number 3 wide receiver for the Eagles. He's been playing quite a bit this year, especially out of the slot. So don't sleep on him at $3,400. He's probably a little bit too expensive for the kind of role that he has, but he has shown big play upside already this year. And then you've got these wide receivers for the Giants, and I'm going to go ahead and just throw them all in here now. And you've got 2 tiers to them. You've got Hyatt and Collins, which should be playing starter level snaps for the Giants, which is crazy because they both suck. But both of them will be out there. And again, I'm not trying to talk too much smack, but I think even Giants fans would say that themselves, that these are young, unproven players, to say the very least. And then the next tier down would be a Gunnar Olszewski and also an Amir Smith-Marset. These are players that may or may not be active. We're not 100% sure. I'm sure that Gunnar will because of his special teams contributions that he has on the Giants. But in Amir Smith-Marset, he's expected to be active this week because of some of the injuries that they have ahead of him. These are all players that are going to see snaps for the Giants. I feel better about the Hyatt and the Collins side. That's why I put them in tier number 1. But tier number 2 down here are usable because they're so cheap, especially in Olszewski. He played even before some of the injuries that you had on the Giants sparingly. He was a role player at best, this gadget guy that they were throwing out there for some screen passes, jet sweeps, that kind of stuff on that offensive production. But these are players that, with that Slane injury and Slane potentially being out, that are usable this week and pretty much no other week on the schedule. So keep an eye out for some of those guys. Get a Daniel Bellinger next at $2,800, backup tight end for the Giants. A lot of people are going to be using a Theo Johnson after last week, but he's expensive, about $3,000 more expensive than he has been for the rest of the year. So Bellinger might actually be the better play on this kind of slate at lower ownership and a much more affordable price tag. A Devin Singletary at $2,000. If you end up having Tracy rolled out, that would open up some usage for him. But if Tracy ends up playing, that pretty much eliminates Devin Singletary from the offense. Grant Calcaterra is technically questionable. You can see that Q tag there. He's the backup tight end for the Eagles, so we're not expecting him to have crazy production. But if he could score a red zone touchdown, that is his way to the optimal lineup. And then finally, we've got Kylan Granson at $200. He's a legit receiving threat for the Eagles. He's not been playing or getting snaps every single week, but between him and Calcaterra, if Calcaterra is rolled out, and I'm going to say this, and again, it sounds bad, but it's the fantasy player inside of me, not the human that wants this. I kind of want Calcaterra to sit because Granson's the much better wide receiving tight end. He's got yard after catch ability. He's fast. He's got the bigger frame in the red zone, could legit score a touchdown. And if Calcaterra's out, that is for sure going to open up usage for Granson. And at $200, he could crack the slate open. And especially, we were mentioning about the cheap captains before. You don't always want to go down to these like $200 players or these like $1,000 players and Showdown all that often, unless it's actually buying you upside towards the top. And because it is such an expensive slate, these guys up here, it's probably the most stringent pricing that we've had for all of 2025. There's a time and place for getting to some of those punt plays towards the very bottom. So that's what I'm looking at for Showdown. Hopefully we can make this one to remember, and see you guys at the top. And now for the prop and the betting side of things, where I've got 2 props that I've already entered for Thursday. You might want to consider adding out there to your own exposure, and we're getting the best payout available here on Prize Picks, which is something that we don't always say. So you can see how this 2-man combination, which we'll explain here in just a moment, we're getting a full 3x payout despite the second prop being a goblin. So maybe a little bit of a coding error that Prize Picks has going on, but either way, we'll take that. On Underdog, if you played these two together, it'd only be a 2.04x payout. And then on Hard Rock Bet, if you took it, it'd only be plus 175. So a clear value on Prize Picks and 2 props that I really like for this game. So let's start with the Jalen Hurts prop up top. He's at even money on Prize Picks. I'm not sure that's going to last the whole way until game time. So that's why watching these previews earlier in the week or being a part of my Patreon page where I post these props as soon as I'm entering them is so valuable. But he's minus 130 towards his over on most of the major books, minus 135, even minus 140 in spots. And though the two-way market on Pinnacle hasn't quite been published yet, when we have him at that minus 135 to minus 140 mark at some of the major books, he's usually at least minus 130 on that two-way Pinnacle market. So if that ends up being the case, you would expect this line to become a goblin at some point, this green little prop like we have towards the bottom, and then the payout is going to start to shift. So if we can get that before then, that's obvious value that we're mixing into our exposure. And as big favorites against this Giants defense, he's got a ton of touchdown equity. They are the higher implied team total. They're probably going to run the ball a lot, especially in the second half if they're playing from ahead, which means that Barkley is going to get some extra usage, but also with Jalen Hurts when they get down into that red zone. They have the tush push. They're infamous for that. And when playing from ahead, they have a much higher touchdown equity with their quarterback when doing so. All of that, I think, makes this a really solid lean to take. So a little bit of line value that I think will bump by the time that we get to tomorrow night, which is why we're taking it now. Then on the other side of this, we have the Jackson Dart over on interceptions, which is a goblin prop, but on other sports books, he's minus 140 to even minus 160 to throw a pick. On a site like Hard Rock Bet, he's minus 155 to throw an interception, minus 150 in some of the other major books. I believe minus 142 to throw a pick on a site like Draftkings. So the fact that it's a Goblin and we're still getting the full 3x payout is a little bit baffling if you're asking me. And from the traditional analysis perspective, it makes plenty of sense. You've got a rookie quarterback that is a little bit risk tolerant. I mean, he takes a lot of hits. He throws a lot of balls downfield with reckless abandonment at times. That's going to lead to some turnovers. And I mean, he'll be the first person to tell you that. And especially when you're going up against a tough defense like this Eagles front, which has absolute killers all over the place, it feels like a game where it could be a rock coming into a hard place, right? You've got Jackson Dart, who's always going to push the needle against a defense that loves pushing back at players. So with all that kind of value on this, again, the weird 3x payout, even though there's even some slight correlation between these as well, obviously if Dart is playing from behind, that's going to lead to them having to throw the ball downfield more. That raises our chances of there being an interception here. And if they're playing from behind, that also spurs on extra usage for the Eagles side. So with the 7-point spread, I think that kind of script is reasonable to expect within this kind of a game. And yeah, with the 3x payout, I will gladly mix that in. Now, on Underdog, would I play that at now 2.02x? They bumped it down even more? Absolutely not, right? That's a little bit more, it's like a plus 102 parlay that you're playing on Underdog. Like, that's an absolute scam. Would I even play it for this plus 175? Nope. Didn't end up mixing it myself at that sort of number, but when we can find line value and grind out those 0.2, those 0.3 units per slip on a site like Prize Picks, it ends up adding up over the end of a season. So if you guys want to see all the kind of exposure that I'm entering Thursday night, you guys can find that on my Patreon page. Link down below to check that out as well. NFL prop tiers where you can find all of that for Underdog, Prize Picks, and on Hard Rock Bet. And this is just the first slip that we've entered, right? It's early in the week. There's a lot of different injury pieces of news that are going to come through, a lot of line movement that's going to happen on the sports books as well. I'm always staying on top of that, trying to find the best value available at that time, and there will probably be a good amount of exposure to come. So for that, check it out on the Patreon page, but that's all I've got for tomorrow night's slate. Alrighty guys, that is all I've got for the Thursday Night Football preview. Go ahead, smash that like button if you haven't already. Also subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the content to come. That'll of course include our main slate breakdowns, our Monday Night Football breakdowns throughout the rest of the year. You won't want to miss any of that, so make sure you subscribe so you get notified when all of that goes live. And also comment down below what you've got is the top score for the Thursday Night Football slate for a chance to earn a free month on my Patreon. And it'll be on a first come, first serve basis, but if you comment the player with the top Draftkings score for tomorrow night, you'll win a free month access to everything on my Patreon. That includes all the NFL projections that you see throughout these videos, also for main slate and Monday Night Football as well, and all the Underdog and Prize Picks exposure that I'm mixing in, and anything on the sports books on top of that, like my Hard Rock Bet exposure, I also post for all my NFL prop tiers. But to join now, to not have to wait for the giveaway to get that exposure, and to get all of my player pool and all the information for this Thursday Night Football slate, check out the link in the description of the video. There you can find the NFL DFS tier. That's where you get access to the spreadsheets, NFL prop tiers for all the Underdog and the Prize Picks stuff. Make sure to check out all of that if you guys haven't already as well. But best of luck. I hope to see a lot of you guys towards the top end of those GPPs. Hope we can cash out on some of our exposure as well, add some units to the bankroll. But until next time, best of luck, as I was saying, and let's have ourselves a night.